I want to tell you that I guess it was maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, I was reading a book by a gentleman by the name of Bill Bratton. Bill Bratton was the, how I found this book or why I read it, I don't really know, but he was the police chief of New York City. He was also the head of the transit police in New York City, another very tough job. And then he went to Los Angeles, where he became the chief of police in LA and had to deal with the gangs. He was one of the people that came up with community policing. He made some kind of an agreement with the gangs in LA that nobody thought made any sense, and apparently, at least initially, seemed to work out. And I called Chief Bratton out of the blue, and I think he was a little taken aback because he didn't know who I was. And I said, "Sir, I'm calling you because I want to know, since you're one of the greatest reformers of policing, could you tell me what you think about what we need to do to reform our prisons?" And he said to me, he didn't know. He said, "The prisons are the single most unreformed part of state government across the country today." And that was a few years ago. I don't think much has changed. I mean, we're all grappling with a lot of issues. I mean, when you think about it, Ohio has, I believe it's 51,000 people in prison, under confinement. I mean, it's a shocking number. And we all of us think, first of all, we want the public to be safe. We all want to be safe. We don't want to have a situation where we've got somebody that is not being confined properly who's a threat to us. But secondly, I think all in our hearts hope that there's always the possibility of rehabilitation, that you take somebody that really did things that were terrible, but I think deep in our souls we all say, could we take that person somehow, maybe give them a little shake, but at the end of the day, to have them get their life right, because I think we all know that a life in prison is a life that the Lord is not pleased with, because He gives everybody certain gifts and He expects us all to use them. And we all, I think, believe we're better off when people can use their gifts. And but thirdly, we also, of course, have to be worried about costs, because the costs are absolutely enormous when it comes to our institutions. So I started out thinking about who it is that's capable of being able to bring reform and have Ohio be a leader, not only in terms of confinement, but rehabilitation, and somebody that can help us to move into the 21st century as we deal with this giant population and the need to bring about reform in difficult economic times. But it's just not about a budget, it's also about the right thing to do. And I've always been bothered by the fact that we have a number of people who are in our prisons who are in there for a relatively short period of time. You stick somebody who's in prison for less than a year and put them next to a murderer, I'm not sure things work out very well. Recidivism rate goes up. It's just, none of it is good. So I was looking for somebody who I thought had guts, who had experience, and had courage to lead, and could be an innovator. And then out of the blue, my folks were able to find Gary Moore. And so what about Gary? Okay, well, I mean, he has enormous experience inside these prisons. Even to the point where you really have to be impressed with the fact that after Lucasville, he was sent by the governor to Lucasville to figure out what went wrong and what we could do to improve things. As I recall, Gary, in our conversations, you were also involved in the desegregation of one of our prisons, which was very difficult, where Gary told me that there were times in that parking lot where people threatened him because he was forward-looking and in charge of a very significant reform that needed to be conducted inside of our prisons. So he's been a warden a number of times, so he has the experience inside of the system, but he has also now, of course, moved on, and now he works in the private sector in the same area of prisons. And so, when we think about the need to innovate and we think about the need to reform, You know, when we take a look at the Corrections Corporation of America, which is the largest private corrections provider in the U.S., they have seen a 20% reduction in significant incidents. You begin to say, I think this must be the guy who can help us to innovate, improve the situation, help us to solve some of the financial problems, introduce a reasonable sentencing reform proposal where we have people confined, where the public is safe, but at the lowest possible price, and where we can think about rehabilitation, where can we be successful in that, how can we reduce recidivism rates. All these things are front and center. And this will not be an easy job. It will be a difficult job. It will be a challenge. But I think that Gary has the potential to become one of the great leaders in our country, and that Ohio can help show the way forward in terms of a progressive approach to how we keep the public safe and begin to institute the kind of reforms that we need in the 21st century. One of the other things I'd like to add, since we have a number of members of the press here today, is there have been times when I have objected to some of the requests for, reveal, give me your resumes, I want you to see everything, and I've complained a little bit about transparency and the lack of common sense as it relates to that. Gary, being a person who has worked for CCA, I mean, that's a place where there's a legitimate need for transparency. As we consider the various alternatives, additional privatization, the need to be forward-thinking, Gary, working in the private sector, we're going to have to be clear. There'll be times when he'll probably have to recuse himself from some decisions that will need to be made. But here's a perfect case where I would be in a complete agreement with the esteemed members of our media that there is a need for transparency, a place where I would agree with that. Look, I think this is a really good day for the state of Ohio. Gary could have just gone in the private sector. He could have put his time in. He had a nice job. Could have been an easy life. You sure about this? It could have been an easy life. But you know what we're finding, and I have to tell you, I'm really excited about it, getting a lot of really good people who are coming to work in this administration because they want to make a difference. There is a sense out there that change is happening in Ohio and that real change is going to happen in Ohio, and I find a lot of people very, very excited. I said to Gary turned this job, he was approached apparently 3 times, turned it down. Then I guess in the quiet of night he thought, this is my chance to get my hands on the wheel and do something for my state and really ultimately do something for his country, because that's the way I look at some of the things that we're doing in our state. So it's a great day. I'm deeply appreciative of the fact that he would come out of the private sector, come back into public service with all the headaches. And believe me, there'll be a lot of headaches that he's going to face, a lot of challenges, but we'll do it together, and I'm very proud that he's going to join our team. So without any further ado, your own hometown hero here, Gary.
I will tell you this, Governor, I never believed in my entire life, growing up in a town of 1,200 people in Marion County, that the governor would ever introduce me, and that was a gracious introduction. And I think you're...
I'm not governor until...
And I just have a few things. I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank Judge Ward, for arranging this. It's tight quarters, but we certainly appreciate everyone being here. Rich was one of the first people I met 26 years ago when he was county prosecutor. AJ was working with me at the time back there as an assistant warden, and we ended up adding a few sentences to some inmates who were lodging at our facility, as well as a few employees that acted illegally, and Rich has been a great asset, as you guys know, to this community and to me as we go along. I want to thank my family for being here. I think I'm going to have to take them out to dinner, I think, or lunch, or whatever this is, but it means a great deal to me, because I will tell you, Governor, I'm humbled by this opportunity. I'm humbled with the enormity of what we have to do, the responsibility, and quite frankly, the fact that Ohio has been a great resource for this country when it comes to corrections. But it's time we've got to do things a little differently. We've got to do things with a little more resource in mind. But I will tell you this: we are committed. We are committed to making sure that we keep the right people locked up, and we build incentives and disincentives for them when they act properly. We're going to, when we give programming, it's going to be evidence-based. We're not going to give programming in this throughout our prisons just to do it. It's going to be evidence-based, and we're blessed with a series of universities in Ohio that have a lot of great criminal justice programs, Edla being one, and we're going to create best practices to do the right thing, and we understand kind of the three chairs of our and I'll just end with this. I think there's three chairs to a good correctional stool. The first one's people. And as we know, those that have worked with me before in the Department of Corrections, we institute back to basics where we ask the people that are working the post what needs to be done to make this a safer, more secure post, and we go about doing business to change that. And we handle our issues and we listen to people. Secondly, operations. We've got to do things a little differently. We've got to take a look at what is important to us. Not everything's the highest priority. We prioritize, we develop key measures of those, and we become performance-based, and we look at trends and address issues before they become incidents. We want to be proactive, and that also means, just like the community policing model, Governor, that you talked about, we put staff in close proximity supervising inmates with having a modeling relationship on inmates so that we anticipate those kind of issues. We know the inmates, we take care of those, and we proactively take care of business before we have issues. And then finally is our resource management. And there are great best practices in Ohio and around the country that we're going to employ to use our staff in the most effective way that we can to make a difference. So this is an honor that I never anticipated, and I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you, and give him a round of applause. He did